Hey guys, welcome back. Part 5, Invertebrate Animals, the world's most diverse chapter in any biology book ever. So let's keep pressing on. This is going to be a fun one because we get to finally talk about insects, which are super cool, and some worms that make my stomach hurt. So let's jump right into it here. Uh, Roundworms, we do have some unsegmented worms that molt, and we put them in their own category. And you guys, of course, know what molting is. If it's a bird, it drops its feathers. If it's a some sort of worm, pardon me, it sheds its skin, its outer skin. And so these unsegmented worms have a cylindrical body and they have this collagen rich cuticle. And collagen is a protein, it's in human skin too, that is a nice blend of flexible but still pretty tough. It's a good thing to build an outside layer of your body on. And so as they grow, they have to shed that collagen cuticle and just grow longer, grow a new cuticle and shed again and grow longer, on and on and on. A lot of species, 20,000 species. We're going to get them in fresh water. We're going to get them in the oceans, soil, but only if it's really damp. And then the part that we're not that excited about is a lot of these cylindrical worms are going to be parasitizing animal guts and living inside of animals. So that's kind of gross. Most of these things are free living decomposers. There's little stuff in the soil that we're never going to see and it's never going to infect us, and less than a millimeter long is incredibly small. And so these are worms, just like earthworms, just a whole lot smaller, and they have to molt, so that's kind of weird. And the ones that get the most attention are parasitic roundworms that will infect humans because they bother us the most. Here's an intestinal parasite, Ascaris, and passed by a child. I'll let you interpret what that means. Guessing a kiddo got it out naturally there. But you can see how ridiculously long this is when you think about how long a small intestine in a human is. That worm had been in there growing for quite a while. This guy here has lymphatic filariasis, and basically what happens is he was infected by a roundworm that got into his lymphatic vessels, and all over the human body there's arteries and veins that carry blood everywhere, and you probably already knew that, but there's also lymph vessels and lymph nodes. And what this parasite does is it wants to live in the lymph vessels. And I don't think it's purposefully trying to harm the human, but as the worm swims, if you will, crawls through the lymph vessels, it destroys one-way valves. All of our vessels have one-way valves that allow blood and lymph to make it back up through the leg and into the rest of our body so that we can break it down, recirculate it, that kind of stuff. And as that parasite breaks down those valves, the lymph can't get out of the tissues, so it starts to swell up those tissues, and you can see his lower leg compared to his other leg here is pretty significantly different. And then this one is a roundworm that's entering the root of a plant, and it's going to infect that plant and parasitize that plant there. So roundworms, some are beneficial and some are harmful. Okay, so let's look at arthropods. Arthropods are animals that need to molt that have jointed legs. And so an arthropod is going to have a hard, jointed external skeleton. So they're going to have to shed that skeleton if they want to grow past a certain size. It's our most diverse invertebrate group, and there are a lot of adaptations that helped arthropods to be successful. One is the exoskeleton. When you get an exoskeleton, you can move away from the water, which is kind of cool, and start to be successful in some drier habitats. The downside to an exoskeleton is it can get a little bit heavy. They have jointed appendages, which allow movements, and so unlike um, just having one big body plate on you, as you get joints, you can start to get things like legs and a body that can be a lot more flexible than the locked-in plates that we've seen so far, as we've looked at things like bivalves and that weird chitin thing with the 8 plates. Those were pretty locked in. We're going to get some more movement with arthropods. They have modified segments. Think abdomen, thorax, head, things like that. Segments with different jobs. And so anytime you get that compartmentalization, that can be good because we can become more and more diverse as our different body segments become more diverse. As we continue on with these animals, we start to see compound eyes, which are really crazy, and antennae, and so they become much better at sensing their environment and much better at surviving. And then finally, we get a body plan that changes during their life cycle, which is really cool. And that's the whole larva, egg, pupa, adult, that kind of business there. So we got to break these down into orders because there's just an impossible number of them. So we start with this crazy word, Chelicerates. Would you believe me if I said it that way? I don't know. I'm going to go with it with confidence. Chelicerates, spiders and their relatives. So, spiders, scorpions, ticks, and the horseshoe crab. And when you want to tell these apart, I mean, I'll probably never be able to spell that right in my life, but if you want to know what group these all belong to, there's two body regions. They have a head, and they have a thorax and an abdomen. Okay? And the head is distinct, and the thorax is and the abdomen are together. And so, like in the horseshoe crab, we've got the head and we've got the thorax and the abdomen back here. Here we have the common bed bug. We got the head, we got the abdomen and thorax back here. And so, arachnids live on land. There are no spiders living in the water that we're aware of. There are 38,000 different spider species, which is pretty decent. We have ticks as well, which have that great, head, abdomen, and they're parasitic vertebrates, and I'm sure you guys have had a tick on you at one point or another. And then we have mites. And mites are much smaller than ticks, and are the common bed bug is one example of them, less than a millimeter long. Some of them can burrow beneath the skin, and they give us all sorts of awful things like bed bug rashes and what's that thing that dogs can get? Mange. That's what they can give you, mange, and then that's not very much fun. And so that's a kind of cool example of arthropods. Horseshoe crabs, as far as fossils that haven't changed a whole lot, they're a super cool example of that. Just a kind of dinosaur looking thing. Very neat. All right, so let's look at myriapods. Myriapod, POTUS feet again, so myriapod, many, many feet. And we got two groups of these, centipedes and millipedes. Centipede is this guy here. Well, I always called them earwigs when I was a kid, but maybe we should have been calling them centipedes. These guys live in the ground. We're not aware of much in the way of aquatic centipedes. They have a pretty flat body, and of course, we're bilaterally symmetrical at this point in the game. Lots of segments, and they're going to have 30 to 50 legs, so quite a lot. And they're predators, as you can tell from this nasty little claw thing he has going on. You can see the eye, the antennae, a lot of cool features that we're just seeing come on the scene with arthropods, and they're predators. Now, millipedes are going to be quite a bit slower with a lot of legs. They're going to have hundreds of pairs of legs, and so you can see, you can pretty much count these. There's not that many, but this guy has a lot of legs, and he's pretty slow, but that's okay because it's mostly a plant eater, decaying vegetation. It's not nearly as frightening as the centipede is. So centipedes and millipedes, really it's a difference in the number of legs and what they eat. So we're still on arthropods. Arthropods also include crustaceans. It's not just spiders and ticks and centipedes. Arthropods make up a lot of what humans eat as well. A lot of marine arthropods are crustaceans, and crustaceans are like crabs and lobsters and stuff, and we eat a lot of those. So the body has two distinctive regions. We're going to go ahead and combine the head with the thorax, and we're going to call it cephalothorax. Cephalo means head. You already knew that. So cephalothorax and the abdomen on the back. And so lobsters, shrimp, crayfish, which are basically like, smaller lobsters, and crabs. And then we have what are called decapods. Deca means 10, and pod means foot. So we have animals called 10 foot, and that means they have 5 pairs of walking legs. And that includes krill and sopapods, which are little tiny swimmers that feed on plankton. And I'll show you a picture of those in just a little bit. And the only group here that you're going to see on land in the way of crustaceans is we have pill bugs, which are kind of cool. They're the roly-poly that you would poke when you were a kid and they'd roll up in a ball. So that group includes larval barnacles and pill bugs as these groups that have the 5 pairs of walking legs. So here you have your krill, and there's their, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 sets of legs, and then they have whatever's going on up here, and their Cephalothorax is their head, which runs from eyeball back to that first segment. You see where that first line is. And then all these little chunks back here are the abdomen. Here we have a female sopapod, which is a little tiny ocean-dwelling guy. I should say gal. She's full of eggs right here, and she's got her 5 pairs of legs out here. And then this one is a barnacle, and it's extending its legs. So again, it's 5 pairs of legs here as well. So that's kind of a cool example of a lot of different animals. So now we're going to talk insects. Insects are a super diverse group, and they have 3 body parts that are all distinctly separated. So we have the insect has a head, it has a thorax, and it has an abdomen. And the group is largely terrestrial. Most of our insects are going to live on land or spend most of their life on land, but there are some exceptions to that. Our earliest insects, we believe, were ground-dwelling. They did not undergo metamorphosis, but now most of our insects, if not all, will undergo metamorphosis, where they have distinct life stages that look different from one another. So most of our modern insects have wings, and when they have wings, they're probably going to need to undergo metamorphosis, which is changing these stages, because they're not just born with wings. You know, they're born as a larva, and the larva changes into a pupa, and then the pupa changes into an adult. And it's difficult to overestimate the importance of insects when it comes to ecosystems and ecology and just the global population of animals. We have insects, they're level 1. You know, I mean, you have plants, then you have the primary consumers, which are insects. And then insects feed and pollinate and decompose everything. They are insanely important to the ecosystem. If it weren't for insects, we would be toast in no time. We need insects a lot more than they need us. They really are. They don't get a lot of attention, but they really do hold entire ecosystems together. And so when it comes to metamorphosis, here's your very typical grade school example. Adult butterfly lays an egg. The egg develops into a larva, which looks different from the egg. The larva builds a cocoon and goes into the stage called a pupa, where it looks different from the larva. And the pupa hatches and becomes the winged adult. And so you have different stages when you want to grow wings as an insect. And that's super cool to understand. And it's not nearly as boring as one might think. And you guys know me. You know, Mr. Stecker's got to bring fly fishing in if he can. This is a real simple mayfly example of the same thing. This right here is a real mayfly larva. And those are 2 flies to imitate it in the creek. Mayfly larva sits on the bottom of the creek, filter feeding away. As it grows and it gets ready to go through metamorphosis, the larva turns into a pupa. Looks like this right here. That pupa gets this big bubble of air. It's going to carry it to the surface, and it's going to swim to the surface. When it gets to the surface, the mayfly adult will literally crawl out of the pupa's body. And if you've never seen this, it is disgusting and amazing, and you should see it. Sometimes it'll happen on my shirt while I'm fly fishing, and I'll just watch it. And so the adult will crawl out of the pupa and dry its wings off. And at this point in the game, the digestive organs have actually turned into reproductive organs, and it can't eat anything ever again. And it will dry its wings off, take off, reproduce, drop a whole bunch of eggs in the creek, and die. And trout eat these at every stage. All year long, they eat the larva, and we have flies that imitate those. When the larva turns into a pupa and starts to raise up, we have flies that imitate a pupa, even with a little bubble on it. When the pupa hatches and turns into what we call a dun or a spinner, the adult mayfly, we have flies to mimic those. And it's pretty fun because the more you understand it, the better you are at fly fishing. And who would have thought bugs would be so cool? So there you go. Insects, when it comes to their ecology, you know, not just mayflies or butterflies, but all insects, they're incredibly important. They pollinate flowering plants. No pollination, no new plants. They're important as food for wildlife, and honestly, a lot of people too. In North America, we kind of turn our nose up at the idea of eating bugs, but there's a lot of places in the world where bugs are a huge protein source, and people don't shy away from eating them. Wildlife, birds, small mammals, people, everything eats bugs. Fish, of course, which I just mentioned. Insects are decomposers. They dispose of waste and remains of dead animals, which is a very important job. And on I guess, a bad note, insects are also humans' main competitor for crops, more so than birds, more so than deer. 1/3 of all the crops we grow in the U.S. are lost to insects if they can infect crops, eat the crops, that kind of stuff. So we are in competition with the insects for the crops. And another thing that is not so great about insects is they can spread human disease. Certainly mosquitoes get a lot of attention for that as being a vector for a variety of viruses. And so that's one example where um, mosquitoes are important. They are. And they serve an important role in the ecosystem, and they are a huge food source for a lot of fish and aquatic animals. But once they're out and drinking blood, they can spread all sorts of things, malaria, uh, all sorts of different diseases that we can get. Certain viruses that are kind of popular, like Zika virus, for example, and things like that can be spread through mosquitoes, and it makes people very nervous. So we're going to stop there. We'll do echinoderms next time. We're trying to keep these a little bit shorter. That's bugs. Hope you enjoyed it.